experts in this. Thank you. There's another great book. And if you're real nice, when we get back to having live meetings, Barbara will sign your copy for you. So this is Barbara Eisenstein's book, which is a really excellent book for beginners especially. It's not a plant encyclopedia. In it, she discusses her 20 favorite plants out of 17 billion. But it really gives you some really good down-to-earth information about starting and maintaining a native plant garden, and every gardener needs to hear that, with some wonderful essays that just will inspire you like crazy. Just a real quick explanation of why California is so amazing. We have an incredibly huge flora within the state boundaries of California because of the diversity of our geography and soils and climates. We ended up with an amazing number of plants, more than all of the other continuous states combined. So you have just an incredible amount of plants to choose from. No matter where you are on Earth, native plants evolve with native animals, and year-round color attracts and supports these wild creatures, which is what we all want to do. No matter what you put in, you're putting in a habitat, but if you put in a habitat with native plants, you will support our native creatures as well, including this yellow-faced bumblebee, Undullia lanceolata, a beautiful succulent. So just for context, color is flowers and more flowers and more flowers, but also it includes fruit and seed pods and seeds and foliage and bark. So all of these things are what make up your garden, including all those many shades of green and all of the beautiful olive greens and silvers that come from our California plants that are just so special and look so good in our light. So fall is our main planting time. The natives have been dormant during the summer when it was hot and they haven't had any rain for 6 or 8 months. And they are ready to root and grow as soon as the temperatures start dropping and the nights get longer. And then when it starts to rain, they're really ready. So it's the best time to put in most of your plants and your bulbs and your seed. Not all, but most. This is one of the stars of the summer garden. This is California fuchsia. It is the most important hummingbird plant in late summer and early fall. And indeed, these will start flowering in late summer and they'll go all the way into early winter. Really easy to grow, heat-loving, drought-tolerant, low-growing perennials with tubular red flowers, usually red. Wonderful, California fuchsia. Another star of the autumn, and there should be one of the things that got dropped out was the caption on here for the photo credit. It's for somebody named Stickpen. This is our California goldenrod. This is actually a riparian plant, so you want to put it where it will get some water during most of the year, and that's when it's going to flower most beautifully in the fall. If it's really, really dry all year long, you won't get as good of a show. Another great thing out of fall is the fall fruit. So these are the rose hips on our Rosa californica, which has beautiful, fragrant, pale pink single roses in the summer and in the spring and early summer that result in these beautiful rose hips that are wonderful for both people and wildlife. Fall seed heads are really important. On all those things that flowered in the spring and in the summer, you're going to end up with seeds in the fall. So on the left is a picture of St. Catherine's lace in the springtime with the beautiful, huge inflorescences of whitish flowers. And then over on the right is what happens in the fall. And these flowers are great for cutting in all stages. It's a fabulous, super easy to grow bush with really gorgeous flowers on it. And all of the buckwheats, no matter what color their flowers are, do what is called rusting. And I'm borrowing that from Carlos Flores, who's a landscape architect. They all turn this beautiful rusty brown, rusty red, and some go to even black. There is fall and winter foliage in Southern California. Granted, it isn't Vermont. If it's really cold, you might get some yellow or some orangey on your big leaf maple or on your sycamore. The most dependable, one of the most dependable of all of the plants for fall foliage is the basket bush, which looks like, the leaves look exactly like poison oak. So very interesting plant. It's very closely related to poison oak. And they will turn great reds and corals and yellows as they drop in the fall. It's a big shrub, about 6 by 6, medium-sized shrub. And then I stuck this in before winter. Arctostaphthus Refugionsis, the Refugio manzanita, is always the first to bloom. I've heard of them blooming in September or October. So if you would like to have a long cycle of manzanitas in bloom, and you could do the same thing with early and mid-season and late Ceanothus, you definitely want to put one of these in. And it's a surprisingly quick growing manzanita. It can get up to about 6, 8, 10 feet and fairly rapidly compared to others. Now we're moving into winter. This is when both the plants and the gardeners celebrate the seasonal rains, and we hope for more and more of them every year. And this is when peak planting continues. As long as you've got that cool weather and you've got the rains, it's a great time to plant natives. The best fruit for the birds, and the only fruit for the birds in the wintertime in Southern California, is toyon. So you definitely want to put in at least one shrub of toyon. You can grow it in a container, you can use it as a hedge, you can use it as an informal hedge because you don't want to cut the flowers off. You can grow it as a small tree. It is also the official native plant of the city of Los Angeles. So if you want to be patriotic, you can put it in. But birds need fruit all year long, and this is the one thing that won't give you berries in the wintertime, and it's an incredibly beautiful plant. Also in winter, you'll get the start of your barberries, your Berberis, also known as Mahonia. And this is a really well-known cultivar that is especially full flowering, gets to about 6 feet in time. It's not the world's fastest plant, but will make those beautiful blue berries later in the spring or late winter that the birds and other wildlife will adore. And Xenothis Crasifolius is one of the early flowering Ceanothus, native to our local mountains. They're just finishing up now. And then there are the winter silhouettes, including those of my favorite California tree. Well, I kind of like incense cedar too, it's hard to choose. But Western Sycamore is just a beautiful, beautiful creature all year long, even when its leaves are off, and beautiful muscular trunks and branches. And all year you get to see the wonderful exfoliating bark, but in the winter it becomes even more prominent. And I'm a succulent girl. That's what my parents' nursery was. So got to put some succulents in. And on the left is our beautiful chaparral yucca, and that mama's going to die, but she will leave some babies behind. On the bottom is what everybody considers the most beautiful of all the Dudleys. It's actually native to Baja California, up around Ensenada, and it is a really beautiful, beautiful thing. And then over on the right is the Cleric Cactus, which is from our local deserts. And that's a cactus that's pollinated by hummingbirds. Now we're getting into spring. As you're going to see a little leitmotif here. I like hummingbirds. That's an Allen's hummingbird on an ocotillo. And if you want to see hummingbirds in the desert and the ocotillos are flowering, just pull over on that side of the road and wait for 5 minutes and you'll see the hummingbirds. Lots of things flowering in spring. So I'm going to rush through these. Ribes will often start flowering in the winter and then go into the spring. And here are two examples. On the left is chaparral currant, which is an upright shrub to about 5 feet or so with beautiful hanging skeins of pink flowers. Over on the right is a gooseberry. And the big difference between gooseberries and currants are these thorns. You can see where my cursor is. Fuchsia flowered gooseberry is very well armed with these very, very sharp thorns. So gooseberries have thorns, currants do not. They all attract and are pollinated by hummingbirds though, so they're great to have in a garden. And annual wildflowers. So these you want to plant from seed in fall or early winter. When you start getting into February, you're on the cusp of being too late. So best time to do it is really October, November, December at latest, and then you'll have a really long season and you can put in successions of them. Wildflowers are very, very special. There's tidy tips in there, the yellow with the white edge, and then California poppies, of course. And bulbs should also be planted in the fall. We have over 300 species of geophytes, of earth-loving plants, which are bulbs and corms and tubers and rhizomes. And the time to plant most of them is in the fall. So look for them as dry bulbs in October or November, and that's when you want to put them in. One of the most popular and one of the best of all the manzanitas for gardens is called Howard Mcmahon. On the left, you see the flowers. Over on the right is a really old one, because they can get up about 6-8 feet. A nice one where it's been pruned out on the bottom to show the structure of the plant. Really good, dependable. One of the manzanitas that you don't have to worry about as a beginner. So really, really good starting plant, and a great plant for non-beginners as well. This is one of the many, many cultivars of Ceanothus, and this is a Yankee Point, which is a ground cover, but it does get up 2 to 3 feet, and each plant will fill 100 square feet. So you only need one for every 100 square feet. And I love that in this particular garden, you're allowed to see the natural edge of this plant because it was given enough space. Too often it's not given enough space, and then the gardeners come and hedge the side of it, and it looks really terrible. So make sure you give lots of room to it, and you'll end up with a really beautiful free flowering plant. You can tell I like this one. The picture's really big. That's all I'm going to say. We have lots of irises, but this is one of the best for gardeners. And I really like this monkey flower. It's called Trish, and it is kind of an old rose mauvey color. And whereas a lot of the selections on the monkey flowers are short-lived and fussy, this one, it holds on, it does well. So I would look for Mimulus or Diplicus Trish. I've got 2 shots of Penstemon in here. Penstemon is the largest genus of flowering plants in North America, and we have a few dozen of them. This is Penstemon Cantranthifolius, or scarlet bugler, with an Anna's hummingbird. This is one that has just stool growth at the bottom and then sends up a spike of flowers with these tubular red blossoms on them. And then this is Penstemon Palmeri, which is a desert species, and it's pink, and it's the only fragrant penstemon. So you may want to look for this in your garden. It's really amazing how many of our desert plants do really well inland, away from the desert in our gardens. So I encourage you to try those guys. This is a trio of cultivar sages, left to right. So from the back, we've got Pinky, in the middle is Pozo Blue, and up close is Desperado, which is the largest of all the hybrid sages. It can get up to about 6 feet at least with the plant, and with the flower spikes up to 8 to 10 feet. But this was taken, I believe, in late April or May at Theodore Payne. And you can see what great looking plants. And they looked just as good the next year after a light pruning. So that's the note I wanted to say, was sages will start flowering in the spring, but many of them will go into the summer, or the desert species, if they're watered, they'll flower again in the summer. So sages are really great long flowering. This is another one. Monardellas may start in the spring, but they will go through summer and into fall. So this is Odoratisma, extremely, extremely odorous, which is really cool. I just love this picture of the swallowtail on the flowers. These are really great for attracting butterflies, all of the Coyote Mints. Good for making tea as well. Low growing perennials, only up to a couple of feet. Summer, most of the natives are dormant now. They haven't had rain for months. They've finished setting their seed. They're going to sleep for a while. They don't want you to water them. They want to rest. And it's time for you to go and relax in the shade. However, we're gardeners, so we want to plant all year. So keep in mind that it's okay to put in desert plants and riparian plants, things that come from next to streams and creeks, because they're used to having intermittent or year-round water on their roots. So it's okay to plant those things during the summer. And here are some dependable flowering things, though. Again, buckwheats will start in the spring and they'll go into summer. This is one of many, many, many. This is one of the most common plants in California, our California buckwheat, with a beautiful little butterfly on it. And one of my favorite plants, the island bush snapdragon, hummingbird plant, of course. Each of those little flowers, lipstick red, about 1 inch long, great in a pot, great in the ground. Desert willow, beautiful small tree, related to jacarandas that will attract bees and butterflies and hummingbirds, and really lovely garden addition. This is golden yarrow, a great drought tolerant, heat tolerant perennial for your garden, gets about 2 feet by 2 feet. Another butterfly attractor. and some summer fruit. Barbara, you did give me permission to use these pictures, didn't you? So over on the left is the fruit and the fall foliage of Vitis Rogers Red, which is actually has been proved through DNA studies to be a hybrid between a European wine grape and Vitis californica, which is our native California grape. It produces lovely little fruit that are kind of like miniature Concords, and it turns scarlet in the fall. So even though it's half European, it's a pretty darn good plant. And then over on the right are the fruit of our blue or Mexican elderberry, which is a really easy small tree to grow and very important for wildlife. And the birds love the fruit on this thing. And we're getting near the end here. Okay, oops, it's the best pictures. I can't let you miss those. So spent inflorescences. Oh gosh. Here we go. So don't be a neat freak. Don't cut off all your seed pods. They're very important for the birds for nutrition, and they're also incredibly beautiful. So on the left, you have chia, which is an annual sage. These are all sages. In the middle is hummingbird sage, and on the right are the, they're not quite done yet, inflorescences of Salvia desperado, that giant hybrid I showed you before. And this is when summer kind of tones down and the slumber and the beauty end, and the fall arise, and it's time to start the whole thing over again. But I couldn't stop. So you got 3 bonus slides of things I left out. And this is just to tell you there are many plants in the California flora that we use in gardens that are repeat bloomers. So I'm going to show you 3 of those, and then I'm going to stop. So this is our native fairy duster, not the red one, which is from halfway down Baja California. This one is from our local deserts, and it will flower on and off all year. The pink fairy duster. Bonus slide number 2 is the island bush poppy, sometimes called the island tree poppy. And this is a big shrub that can get 8 by 8, 10 by 10 with this beautiful glaucous bluish foliage and wonderful pale yellow flowers on and off all year long. And here's the last slide, Verbena lilacina de lamina. It's the plant name we all like to say, much better than the common name, which isn't as much fun to say. And this was introduced at Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. And you can see a beautiful rounded shrub, maybe about 2.5 by 2.5 at most. And it is a butterfly magnet. The flowers smell like cloves, like just really good stuff. So that's it. Thank you. Go plant. Actually, when is it? It's go plant some desert plants.
Thank you, Lily. That is a good appetizer for the color that people can put into their own personal gardens, and so that was great, Lily.
Great.
So now the next thing we'd like to do is move into our panel Q&A with Lily and and Barbara Eisenstein and Orchid Black. And as you'll see, they really are expert and are in the local plants and are wonderful at answering questions that people have about their gardens. So please fire away with the questions you might have about the color aspects that Lily was talking about, or anything else. But before we do that, Graham Bothwell is trying to keep us out of trouble, and so he reminded me to that if you do, since this is being recorded, if you do not want to be identified, then be sure you state your questions to indicate that you want to remain anonymous. If that's the case, if you don't care, then your name will show up the way you signed in to Zoom. So you can just say ask to be anonymous, or just don't answer your question. So I hope that will take care of it. So we're joined by Orchid Black and Barbara Eisenstein. Are you?
Hi, everybody.
Unmuted?
I think so. We're all ready.
Okay, great. Rebecca, do you have some questions for us?
There is a question.
Yeah. Oh, do you see it already, Orchid?
Yes.
The container.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So you want to start us off, Lily, with the container?
I guess we could each give our favorites. So the question is what would grow in a container to attract beasties and give color. So definitely I would say any of the Galvesias. So either the island bush snapdragon, which I showed, which is Galvesia speciosa, or Galvesia, oh my God, what's wrong with me? What's the species of the desert one? Juncia, okay, or Galvesia juncia, which is the Baja bush snapdragon, which can actually take more sun and more heat. But they'll both grow in sizable containers, good enough size containers. One thing I want to mention, if you're putting the natives in containers, they need water more often than they would need them in the ground, because they can't put roots into the ground. And you should use a cactus and succulent potting soil, something that has some organic matter in it but drains quickly. So I also recommend planting for some pots full of native bulbs or native annuals. Really do pots full of mixed annuals that you can plant in September or October, and maybe do one every month, and then you can have a succession of color with them.
Nice. Okay, I guess I'll jump in next. As long as Lily gave some tips on how to keep these in the soil to use, I would suggest that you pay attention to placement. Try to keep the pot cool, so you don't want the roots to cook. If you have a black plastic pot in our climate and the sun hits it, you're going to cook the roots. So try to use some, maybe a lighter colored pot, and try to keep the container in particular cool. And also I have found that for most of the container plants, a little afternoon shade's kind of a good thing, which is fine on patios. It's just, again,
Barbara, one of the tricks, if you're in a really hot spot, double pot them.
Double potting.
Because then you have the insulation between the two pots, and that really helps to keep the root zone cool.
Right. So those were the tips. And it was wonderful because this question came up, so I could kind of put it together in my head a little bit more quickly. I'm going to say that you can try anything, and a remarkable number of things actually work. And by work, I mean that they will last. You might get 2 or 3 or 4 years. You may not get 10 or 15 that you might expect in the ground, but you can get quite a number of years. And some people get, just an extraordinary number of years. So I would say monkey flowers are wonderful in pots. Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, years ago, I went there, and they had a really fabulous monkey flowers in containers under an oak tree. And it lit up this area that would otherwise be dark. So that's Diplicus, whichever ones you want to use, cultivars or otherwise. And then to attract lots of critters, I would suggest giving yarrow, Achillea millefolium, and go with our native yarrow. And those are my first 2 suggestions. Let's have orchid. We could spend the whole rest of the night.
I know we could do forever.
We could, and I was just teaching California natives for UCLA Extension, and lots of people just don't have dirt.
Nope.
So,
I was at a client's house today who has burgundy desert willow in a pot. She's planning on putting it in the ground. I've seen them growing in pots. And isn't it wonderful that we're getting our vaccinations and we can go see clients again, and maybe we can have meetings again and plant forums where we can actually see each other's plants, and won't that be fun?
Yeah. So my list, depending on your sun or shade for pots, one of the cutest is the coral bells, the Euchera species, because they have that perfect circular rosette. So that's mostly for shade or high filtered shade. The iris also do great in a pot. And then there are things like the Zauschneria. Okay, it's epilobium now. But all the California fuchsias do great in a pot for, bright sun. It does restrict their spreading a little bit, but they can drape nicely over the edge of the pot, and that looks great. And then another favorite of mine is the Coyote Mint, because
I was going to say that
perfect round mound in the pot.
And they're great in shade, most of them. They can take sun, but they work well in shade.
right? So adaptable. And then a lot of people don't think of this, but the juncus is a nice backdrop to a pot. And then you can put something fluffy in front of it, something draping like a
Strawberry.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, something, and that can be a beautiful pot. We're just giving away all the secrets
I
today.
know.
But
We have, I mean, look at all the ferns we have in California. I mean, you can, oh God, there are so many great things. And I agree with Barbara, try everything. Just know that if it's going to be, if it tends to be a large growing plant, that you want to have a large pot. Go up incrementally, but you're not going to grow a big shrub or small tree in a 12-inch pot. So that's good for the one monkey flower. So, but
and speaking of that, Lily, someone asked us how Cynthia Smith asked us how large a pot would we need for a holly leaf cherry shrub or tree. So it depends on how old it is. I'm just in with when it's young.
If you start with a 1 gallon container, you don't want to put it into a giant pot because it'll stay too wet in proportion to the amount of roots. So you might have to graduate it up. If you start with a larger pot, 5 gallon or something, you could put it into, a 24-inch, 30-inch container, and it could stay in there for a couple of years. But eventually you'd need to get even bigger. You could probably bonsai it, I mean, you can prune things back a little bit too, but everything in a pot needs to have its soil refreshed and its roots unjammed after a few years. So, when the soil starts going down in the pot, you really need to repot that baby. So.
And
Wow.
I believe the answer is yes, but we had basically the same question for Toyon. So the same advice for a Toyon?
In a pot? Just, I think it's a great container plant. It takes to moderate pruning so you can shape it in the pot and or just let it have its natural shape with all the foliage. And just be careful about when you do pruning on it because it flowers in spring and early summer. So you don't want to be cutting off the flowers.
Right. Lily mentioned the use of a cactus mix or just a well-drained soil. And I think there was a question somewhere in here, to fertilize or not. And just go very light if you're going to fertilize. Actually, in a sense, your plant will tell you. If your plant is slightly yellowed, if it's very yellowed, it's probably the roots have been wet and there's a big problem. But if you notice that it's not, it's just kind of yellowing, and this is during the period of active growth.
I would say the timing is important.
Leaves, right, the new leaves, then it's telling you I need some more nitrogen. I need some fertilizer. But yes, I mean, you're going to have to change the soil occasionally and fertilize, but go light on it, not a heavy, because you don't want to encourage rampant growth.
About 1/4 strength is the recommended amount. And make sure that you water your plant first before you put on the fertilizer or all the leaves will turn black and fall off.
Right, right.
You don't want that to happen.
No.
I saw one question I think that's real important in here because everybody loves to grow California poppies, and when they're successful, they can't get rid of them and they're going, oh, why did I do that? However, if you want to grow them and you're having trouble, then it's frustrating. So the question from Peggy is, multiple times I have tried to grow California poppies by seed in a field and they have not taken. It is not an area I can irrigate. What is the secret to getting poppies to grow from seeds? And the secret is irrigation. They're not going to grow without water. So if you put them down at the right time and the birdies don't get them first, and we do have a good rain year, then you'll get some germination on them. But if we have a really dry winter, you have to water them or they're not going to come up. So I would plan to do this during right before we're getting some good rains, put them down and see if that helps.
Right. It's funny because in our nature park in South Pasadena, we have poppies growing there. And, the first year when you get the seeds from wherever you get them and you throw them out, I agree with you that they need some kind of water to break their dormancy and to get them to germinate and start growing in the wintertime coming into spring. But we don't water the nature park, and we didn't get water this year, and the poppies came right back. And that's because it wasn't the first year. Yeah. So once you get them going, you got them going, and watering them, you may get less on a really dry year than other years. They may be smaller, they may not bloom as long That's one thing I've noticed this year, is that they came into bloom and they were done as everything was done very quickly. But I guess I would ask the question, they should have germinated. Water or no water, that's a little puzzling. And I
But
would
birds could have
know-
gotten them if they were sitting there.
I was wondering
So,
when
yeah.
you put them in. So we usually spread, I always try to spread the seeds. I'm actually doing that now. I'm collecting the wildflower seeds out of my garden right now because the wildflowers are gone. I've got big paper bags full of these things. I don't clean them well. I do separate them by type, so I have some control over where I put them. And I take those to the nature park because my garden at home is already really full of wildflowers. So I take these seeds and I mean, you could think to yourself, well, the plant itself is dropping seeds at this time of year. The plant itself is dropping a huge number of seeds at this time of year. And so there's plenty for everybody, but you're collecting them. So hold on to them until the winter. And you can, and then another nice idea is to then start spreading them in the fall, and every few weeks spread a few throughout the season, all the way for poppies, all the way into almost springtime.
Yeah.
And then you should get your display should be spread out a little bit more. Orchid, do you have any?
So, yeah, I'm just gonna assume that they were just not watered enough. And as people stated before, and this happened to my sister, where she spent a lot of money on bird seed in her house, on wildflower seed in her house in Tucson, and it was environmentally correct bird seed. Or ecologically correct, I should say.
Expensive bird seed.
Yes, expensive, ecologically. So putting your seed out with sand can also help hold the water in the ground. Just, it gives things just a little edge, or very small gravel is even sometimes used in wildflower plantings. That doesn't get you out of watering. You still have to water because native plants and native seeds, particularly, even the commercial ones, still have some high dormancy. And if they don't get enough water, they just won't break dormancy.
Right.
They have chemicals that tell them that there's not enough water. And if they came up in years with bad water, we wouldn't have any wildflowers left. They know.
Another suggestion on this, which may have happened in your case. If we get an early rain and then we follow it with a winter of no rain, it'll break dormancy, they'll start to sprout, they'll germinate, they'll sprout, and then they'll dry up and die. So once they sprout, and this is, like I say, only the first year when you're first putting them down, because after something like a poppy, it's going to come back on its own, and then you don't have to be very careful. You can't do anything. So anyway, once they sprout and they germinate, you need to follow up with water if we don't get rain. So, yeah.
So you're answering these questions, Orchid. Does that mean that we shouldn't?
No, no, we can. I'm just trying to, for things that we don't.
It just disappeared, the questions that it took them away.
They're still unanswered. You can see the open
I got them.
questions, and
I
the
found them.
tab
I
answer.
found them.
Okay. So there are a zillion questions. So what are we going to do next?
So I wanted to mention here that the question that was, is the chapter taking volunteers? Absolutely. Also, you might consider working with Barbara, and you can get some hands-on experience out in our garden, the public garden.
That's in South Pasadena, and it's on our website, on the CNPS San Gabriel Mountains chapter website for volunteer opportunities.
The other part of that question was how often you water natives in pots. And that's a tricky thing. You just want to make sure the top few inches are dry. And the bigger the pot, the more inches dry you let them go. And when you water, you should always water until it comes out the holes in the bottom. And I recommend double watering. Water once, do your little circuit with your watering on your pots, and come back and do it again. And that'll make sure that you've really re-wetted the root ball well. But never a little bit. And if they're sitting in saucers, make sure you empty the saucers of excess water after you're done. Turkey baster works real well on big ones.
Oh, good idea. I'm just gonna say, because some people really want a rule of thumb, that my own rule of thumb when I was gardening in Pasadena was every other day.
I
It could be
agree.
too often.
No,
on
I
a-
during
on
the
a
summertime.
glazed- In
During-
summertime, maybe,
yeah.
yeah, but you got to be careful because if it's a glazed ceramic pot and somebody does it every other day during cooler weather, they're going to rot their plants. I think I think
Right.
gardeners really need to feel
Yes.
the soil before they water.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not that hard, and if the top inch or two are wet, then you don't water. It's common sense. It's like you just ate a meal, you don't go to dinner, you know? So there needs to be some sensitivity and not to depend just on the calendar. You're going to lose more plants. You're going to
That's true.
lose more plants.
That's true. Now, I travel a lot, so I have some of my pots over the years. I have had some pots on timers when we've been gone. So when I'm there, I water and I do it as Lily and Orchid mentioned. I pay attention to the plants, and they tell you. But when I'm gone, I do. If it's a hot summertime, they're gonna get watered once every 2 or 3 days. Typically, not every day. And when I'm gone, the other thing I do with my containers is I move them all into the shadiest, coolest. I cluster
them together. Yeah.
Cluster them, get them close to the house, cool. And after doing all of that, I lose some. So
Yep.
that's what it is.
I do want to drag in a couple of really fun things that you can grow in pots that are harder to grow in the ground. And one of them is the stream orchid. It goes fully dormant, but it does need a lot of water when it is blooming. So you can drag it out and water it a lot, and it blooms, and it's kind of an amazing native plant. And that's the stream orchid. And then we have our Mariposa lilies, which are often available at the plant sales, and they need to dry out when they're not.
I think a lot of our native bulbs are best in pots for most gardens, including the Mariposa lilies. And then when they're in flower, you can bring them close to you, and it's really special.
And then the gophers don't get them also.
Yeah. I see a question on here asking about good resources for purchasing California natives. I not long ago updated my list because there are some new nurseries, and we've lost some nurseries. So on my website, Weeding Wild Suburbia, if you go under, I think it's how to or something, gardening resources, something like that, and how to, there's a fairly current list of places of where to get California native plants now. Our chapter up until this last November has always had, and many chapters has had its native plant sale at the best time of the year to purchase native plants, which is ours is the first Saturday in November. And we're hoping that we will be able to have a live sale again this year. But you know, who knows what's going to happen next. So anyway, so you can check my website, and there are other sources out there, but I did update it, and it's a pretty good list at this point.
I want to answer this question about my Verbena lilacina de la Mina, because I wanted to say the name. The flowers have all dried out and are brown. Should I deadhead to bring more flowers or let them be? I would take a pair of shears and just groom around the plant. They're on the edges of the plant, so you can just trim it to take off some of the brown ones, and you should be fine.
Right. If you don't water it, it's not going to give you another flush of flowers. If you do water it, it's not going to last as long. It's kind of a deserty plant. Mine are like yours. And what I will do is I will leave the seed heads on there for a little while longer because they're not unsightly. They're kind of nice. So I'm going to leave them. And mine are about 4 or 5 years old now, and they're getting kind of big and woody. So I'm pulling them way back. I'm going to prune them pretty hard. And maybe they'll make it back and maybe they won't. That's such an easy plant to grow. And it looks beautiful right from the get-go. You don't have to wait 2 or 3 years for it to look good. So that's why I'm gonna prune them hard and see if I get another good looking plant. Otherwise I just yank it out. And
when are you gonna do that?
When am I gonna prune them hard? Probably within the next month or so. And I know this is controversial because sometimes you don't want to prune a plant really hard going into the summer because it's really hot. and you just kind of want to leave it alone. And then when you get into the fall, but they don't look very good. And it's my front yard. And like I said, if the plant doesn't make it, I'll get a new one because they're easy, they're fast, and they go into flower very quickly. So that's what I do with plants like that, you know, and I'm not buying so many that it's financially, you know, a big concern. They're beautiful, and sometimes they reseed themselves and you get a freebie that way. So I'm going to be pruning them back pretty soon as I clean up my wildflowers and the garden in general. Yeah. Okay.
What else we got?
I'm going
Orchid,
to
your
say
turn.
that sometimes they also, the Verbena lilacina also do get some dead patches in there.
Mhm.
And so you can just go ahead and cut out the dead patches, and the plant will respond to that.
Yes, yes. Somebody asked, is paintbrush available commercially? And that's a toughie. You don't see it because it's hard to grow it. You can't really grow that in a container.
You can find seed for it. It is hemiparasitic, so it grows off of other plants, especially native grasses. But Jenny Arnold at Theodore Payne has had people do it without the companion plants, and they've done okay. So it's one of these things where you try and do what nature has evolved to do, but you break the rules, and sometimes they grow on their own. But their seed is available.
Right, right. Somebody also said something about how long can you expect monkey flowers to last in the ground? And I'm good with monkey flowers. I don't know why. You never know why you're successful at something. Some people really don't do well with monkey flowers. Mine last, and they last. Gosh, I have one that must be 6 or 7 years old. It's a cultivar.
And you've got medium drainage. You don't
have good drainage. It's not sharp, but it's good. It's loam. It's good.
Longer in DG, decomposed granite, but
right. But I let them look ugly.
That Trish, she's a long-lasting girl.
Eleanor is too.
And Eleanor's beautiful.
But she's long-lasting and very nice. But one of the reasons I think my monkey flowers last a pretty long time is you can treat monkey flowers in different ways. You can treat them like a long-lived annual, because again, they go into bloom very quickly. So you're going to keep it for 2 or 3 years, something like that. And you can cut it back almost now. Mine are just finishing up their blooming. They're still blooming, but they're stopping. And you can cut them back pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can water them, and you can get another flush of flowers over and over again, but this plant won't last as long. Mm-hmm. I let mine look really, and they're right there in the front yard. I just mentioned how I'm cleaning up the verbena, and now I'm going to let you know with the monkey flowers, they're ugly. I let them be ugly, and they're ugly much of the year, but every spring they come back.
But they last longer.
They last longer that way.
If they only do their spring flowering, which is what's natural for
I
them.
let them go dormant at this point, and I get 5 years on them, 5, 6 years,
Good.
something like that. And then the other thing about that is that at the right time of year, right before they're about to go into bloom, when they're actively growing, they are really easy to make cuttings of. Make cuttings, make your own cuttings. They grow quickly. They're really a great plant for that. And like with the verbena, they do their thing very quickly. So buy some more. If they die after 2 or 3 years, get some more.
So I do want to
buy more plants.
I want to break in here and talk about the longest lived monkey flower that I've seen in cultivation.
Okay.
It was at Washington Park, and it lived for at least 10 years. And it was not a small monkey flower. It was a large, glorious monkey flower. So Washington Park on the south slope.
Straight Orchid? What was it?
Yes, straight of the local species. And it was in a place where the irrigation didn't quite reach it. So it was in sharp soil, it was on a slope, and not very much irrigation at all. And so monkey flowers are often sold for dry shade, and people put them in the shade. They don't really look like a drought tolerant plant to them, but when you see them in nature, they're on north slopes or hanging on cliffs. And I had a great discussion with a perennial genius up in Oroville one day, and he's like, we always see them on slopes. Why do we sell them for the shady flat? And so don't be nice to your monkey flower if you want it to live a long time. Or if you want a showy, but not so long-lived plant, you can treat it, the other way that Barbara sometimes treats her monkey flowers with water and heavy pruning.
Right. There's a question on what are 3 or 4 flowering plants for under coast live oaks. This is a toughie because you care more about the coast live oak than you do the flowers. And I mentioned that Santa Barbara Botanic Garden had this beautiful collection of monkey flowers in containers under a coast live oak. And what this allowed was that they didn't have to water the coast live oak. They didn't have to water close to the base of the tree. And it brought color and beauty to that, what I think is beautiful, but would otherwise be a somewhat darker area. So I think you can think in terms of colorful pots and things in colorful pots underneath your oaks, and keep things clean. You pick up those pots, move them around. Don't allow things to get too messy, because you care about your oak. As far as 3 or 4 flowering plants, so what are the other things? I have I have many coast live oaks, but I have one really large old one in my backyard, and I have growing under it a Berberis repens, which does have yellow flowers. I don't have coffeeberry under there one. Yeah. Coffeeberry would work. I have. I also have the Ribes viburnifolium.
I think it's really important, though, Barbara, to mention, which you kind of did, but to stress that nothing should be near the trunk.
Nothing near the trunk.
If you're going to put anything in the ground, especially, there should be tons. It should be way away from the trunk, or you're asking for trouble.
Right. I mean, if you think about it out in nature, almost nothing grows under oaks. Yeah. Poison oak, which we don't really want, although it's got a lot of good color. Yeah. Red leaves. So the Ribes viburnifolium, the Berberis repens, so creeping barberry, and Catalina Island perfume is the Ribes. Other Ribes will work, not too close to the plant, but if you pull them out a little ways, pull it out from the tree. And what else can we put under?
I do want to pitch the Ribes viburnifolium mostly because it plants itself by tip rooting, so that you don't have to plant very many plants.
I think also what's important is that anything that does get planted in the fall, so that when you're watering it to get it established or letting the rain to do it, that's the same time that the oak would be getting its natural irrigation. You don't want to be putting them in March and then watering them through the summer, which is not natural for our local oaks.
And things will grow slowly under an oak or under any tree. They're competing with the tree for light, for water, for nutrients. So be patient if you're going to. It took a really long time for my Ribes and the Berberis to do anything, but they look nice now, sort of.
So I do want to say that you do see in the Santa Monica Mountains the Salvia spathacea in dry shade under oaks. If you want your Salvia spathacea to look better, you might want to put it more toward the south side of the oak. But I also want to say that plants that can tolerate root competition or that grow in walls, such as coral bells, have worked for me under oaks, because coral bells grow, straight out of the rock here in the San Gabriel Mountains. So our local coral bells like Bella Blanca and Hirsutissima, and some of our ones that do grow on north slopes are fine under oaks because they don't really compete that much.
Yeah. The other thing I like to recommend under trees, especially winter deciduous trees, are bulbs, because all you have to do is make a little hole in between roots and you're not damaging the roots, and you just pop that little bulb in there and it comes up, serendipity. It'll come up in the fall and flower in the spring and then die back by, end of spring. So.
I'm going down through this list at this point.
I'm going to answer the California rose question.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
California rose has a large spreading root system, and it's a large spreading plant. So I've seen it
And
in
it's very
4x4
thorny.
openings near the aquatic center in Pasadena, and it filled up the 4x4. So if you're thinking about a pot, you know that's a temporary situation, and buy the biggest pot you can. And then it's going to need a lot of water because it is pretty much a riparian plant.
And like Lily mentioned, it's thorny. So I grew it. That was one of the first plants I put in my little side secret garden, which is kind of dark and shady and nice. It was a little too shady and nice because if you really do want to get the roses, then you got to get some sun on the thing. And it was happy as could be, and it started to spread. And I wasn't getting flowers, and I'm like, no. Yeah, this is just pain. This is just pain. So think about that in a pot as well. This is a painful plant.
A really big pot.
Hurt. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was just looking through some pictures because there's a plant sale in the San Bernardino Mountains on Saturday. And I was looking through pictures at my old house. And I had Cirsium occidental, the cobweb thistle, in a pot, and that was
Wow.
And I had a couple of different Salvia spathicea. I had confetti, and which is kind of a tender, difficult one, but it has flowers in different colors. I would try Powerline Pink, and I also have put in Avis Keaty, which is a yellow form of the Salvia spathicea. So there's a couple of, odder ones for you to think about. The Cirsium was in a pretty tall pot, like 15 inches, and then it itself was so happy to get all that water that it was 4 feet on top of that. So it topped out close to eye level, but it bloomed. It bloomed and it threw seed all over my vegetable garden. So I had it for years.
Yeah, it'll seed around. Yeah, but nicely. So.
That's nice. That's nice. So Dutchman's pipe. I don't have personal experience. When I saw it, when it was growing at Rancho in what is now the container garden, they used it. It was also on a slope. It was pretty shady. I also saw it. It was quite shady.
It was climbing up the old toy on it, Theodore Payne, in the shade.
Yeah.
Right.
And Art told me that you can get the pipe vine swallowtail down here. It's not just up north. So you actually can achieve that ecological connection.
Right. And they did at Rancho. I think I got a picture. It was growing up on a slope.
Pretty cool little plant.
So I want to say that I have seen the Dutchman's pipe in nature in the Feather, near the Feather River, and it was in pretty deep shade also. Yeah. So we're all kind of saying maybe not in the sun. Maybe a high filtered shade would probably be the best you can do.
Yes. Somebody wants to air layer Arctostaphthus. I got nothing on that.
Yeah,
anybody else?
Yeah.
Maybe Ken Taylor, you could air layer Ken Taylor if you're looking for one that, because it does root along its length.
I was going to say that a lot of the manzanitas it's called pegging, where they hit the ground and they root. And a lot of the manzanitas do that. A lot of shrubs will do that in general. If they can touch the ground, they'll do it. Good resource for pruning natives. If you can find a copy of Care and Maintenance for Southern California Native Plant Gardens, you can find it in your library, or you can find it online for $150. There are instructions in there on pruning specific things. Also, I expect, because I know Barbara teaches a class in such things and has great handouts, that some of that is on Barbara Eisenstein's website. Do you have your pruning chart up there?
Probably, almost.
Okay, so check out Barbara's website. Certainly not every plant that you might run into in the native nurseries, will there be literature for? You just have, I would suggest, reading really carefully through California Native Plants for the Garden. In the specific listings, they may tell you certain things about when's the best time to take a certain action with a plant. But yeah, it's hard to find this information, unfortunately, but I would definitely check out Barbara's website.
Yeah, so again, under gardening resources, it's a PDF, And I think it says maintenance. It's like a maintenance calendar. And I got this from Ranch. I used to give it out all the time because it's a 1-page thing.
Yeah.
And it just gives you kind of this all-encompassing calendar. And you always have to be a little careful with that because there are always exceptions to these generalizations we make, but it's really, really helpful. So see if you can find it. If you don't find it and you're on my website, contact me and I'll make sure that you get one. My website is, I'll type it in here. It's weedingwildsuburbia.com.
There's some really good questions. I hope we can do most of them here.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Sphaerosia ambigua, which does great in a pot, by the way. This apricot mallow, one of our wonderful desert plants. I almost put it in as the 4th surprise slide, but I restrained myself. The question is that it's falling over a lot. I would think that could be many, many things. It could be not in enough sun, so it's leaning towards the sun. It could be in too rich soil, which means it's growing too fast and falling over. So I would look at that. You don't want to be amending your soil when you're planting natives, because then they're going to get too much nitrogen and grow too fast and get floppy. So look at those two things. It really does want as much sun as you can give it. You know, if it's falling over, put a stake on it.
And cut it back.
And cut it back. And if it's in too much shade, move it.
Yeah,
while it's still
I'm
small.
gonna say that the best looking one I ever saw was surrounded on 2 sides by asphalt. In the worst compacted, ugly.
I've never seen one in a garden that looks like they do in the wild, where they're like giant and floriferous. I just see here Rebecca wants to answer this question. Come on in, Rebecca.
No, I'm just marking them that they're being answered live. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you wanted to add. Barbara, you want to handle, or Orchid, the next one about the best practices for adding new plants in a garden with older plants?
Sure.
The second part of the question is there, I'll answer this part. Is there a list of plants that do well together, ones that shouldn't be placed together? No. You just have to look at the individual, you know, what each plant wants and match it up with something else that has similar culture. That's what you're doing. You put plants together that have the same needs. But what about adding plants to an old garden, an established garden?
So I'm gonna first say, when Lily says that have the same culture, one thing that she is in fact saying, for, you know, I'm gonna translate horticulture to English here, is plants that have the same watering needs do best together.
Water and light and nutrients.
And light, yes.
And soil.
But
it's
especially
all of those things. Yeah.
Especially water when you're talking about adding plants. And one place you can find that information is on the WUCOLS, WUCOLS.
Yeah. Most people are not going to go to WUCOLS, Orchid. It's a little too complicated, I think, for most people to get into.
Okay.
I mean, I would just say, you know, if you look at, and I don't mean to, you know, cut you off here, but if you look at anything on plants that's intended for the normal gardener, not a professional, which WUCOLS really is, it's going to say, even on California native plants for the garden, they're going to say, you know, soil adaptable, water, drought tolerant, moderate, etc. So just pick your moderates and match your moderates. I think people will get blown away by all that black and white and charty stuff without a lot of pictures, you know. So
well, when I send people there, it's because it has high, medium, low, and very low.
It does.
So that's just for water. I don't really go there for any other.
They stay in that one column.
Yes.
Right. With regard to grouping plants, to me, the way to approach this is not even the high, medium, low, all of that. It's go hiking, go out for a hike, look and see who likes each other, because not only will they do well together if they're growing in nature together, but they look good together. They look really good. So, you know, I try, and I don't do this at my home garden very well or very much, but I try to think about what I'm trying to mimic. And all I'm doing is mimicking it. I'm not recreating anything. I'm mimicking something. So, I like the buckwheats, the sages, they go together. They belong, sagebrush, those things all go together. Then I may think woodland, and then I'll be thinking of the kinds of plants that you would see in an oak woodland or near an oak woodland, desert. And I like to keep the desert. This is a funny story, I think, anyway. So, over the years, my garden transitioned from being all lawn with very old plants. So the question on how one introduces new plants when you already have plants is a very relevant and important question. If the existing garden has really big mature trees, native or not, and you really love those trees, then everything you do, the first thing you think about, is this going to hurt the tree? And if it requires a lot of soil disturbance around the base of the tree, then that's not a good thing. So you think about that in particular, but then little by little, I put things in. Now, unfortunately, as you're doing this, the first year or two, those new plants need water. And the old plants don't want water through the summer in particular, I'm talking about. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, and your best approach is to hand water with a hose. So you can direct the water to the new plants for that first year or two, and try not to be overwatering the existing plants that are already adapted to almost no summer water, hopefully. So those are a few of the tips. It's not that easy. And I mentioned a funny story when I was talking about which plants I put together. So my garden does not really resemble anything natural. I have a deodar, and I have a vegetable garden in the front. So I have whatever I really want to have. But my husband really wanted a desert museum tree, and I had no place to put it that would give it enough sun. And it's in the corner in the front. I'm a corner house. It's a really visible thing. He's kind of pissed off with me because it's growing kind of slowly, but it really isn't. It's doing just fine. But to me, it's bizarre looking. I'm like, this just doesn't belong here. But I'm married.
Yeah.
So now we can get into a little discussion about marriage and family relationships. But I do like to try to pay a little bit of attention to nature and what I think would be growing together out in the wild.
Too bad you couldn't get your neighbor to put in the desert museum, so he could look at it from across the street or something.
Wouldn't that have been great? Anyway, he got it. So and right behind it is a bush poppy, a Dendromachon harfortii. So they both have the yellows going, but it's like, no. There you go. So
So Lily could take the bay laurel because
I'd love to.
She's talked about it, hedging it, and other things.
It's a great container plant. So in answer to your question, it will do very well in a container for a very long time. So I would say if you get a 5-gallon, I would put it in a 24, 28-inch pot. And what we did leave out, Barbara and me and Orchid, is that if you're doing stuff in pots, they should be deep. You don't want any little shallow pots for these things, except the succulents. A lot of them can take shallower pots. But yeah, get a nice deep big pot, and you could do something real pretty and put some decorative rocks on the top. And every 2 to 3 years, take it out, and you can actually shave the roots like a bonsai and cut the root section back and put it back in the same pot, or you could take it out of the pot and shave it and put it in a bigger pot and let the roots get bigger.
I'd caution you, it's a slow one. It's a really slow grower.
That's why it's good in a pot.
That is why it's good in a pot, but it's going to sit there for a long time. And you're going to think you're doing something wrong. And I want to say something about that, about things that aren't growing quickly. And people say, what's wrong with it? Why isn't it growing quickly? It's growing at the rate that it should be growing. Mm-hmm. And it's okay as long as it looks healthy, meaning that the leaves are the right color. It's not dropping leaves. It's not doing something weird. It's not covered with bugs or pests. So the speed at which it grows that's not an indication necessarily of health, although oftentimes we get our natives to grow very rapidly by fertilizing or too rich soil or whatever, and they look fantastic that first year or two. They can't make it through the summer with all that green growth.
Yep.
So Too slow is not usually a problem. Too fast might be a problem in the future. And the health of the plant really depends on how the plant looks and not how quickly it grows.
Yeah.
So I do want to say that two things. One is speaking about the depth of plants. I was also looking through all my pictures, and I came across some Rancho Santa Ana container garden pictures. And like Lily said, the pots for their container garden are 2 to 3 feet deep. They're these long, skinny, or some of them are not that skinny, but a lot of them are, maybe
2 to 3 feet tall.
by 3 feet tall. So,
Yeah.
so when we talk about depth, we're not talking about your average other pot depth. And anybody who wants to do containers might want to consider going out to, it's now California Botanic Garden, but it wasn't then. And looking, they do have a container area on their kind of a patio on the upper deck near the cultivar garden, and just look at their containers. I know several people have asked those questions. And the other thing is that when I find the California Bay in nature, it's in a wet canyon or in a riparian area. So that is one that you can add substantial water to.
Yeah. Orchid, I'm gonna burst your bubble a little bit. Those tall pots, a lot of them were used because they wanted that look. They wanted the pot, they wanted the plant to be at that height.
Okay.
And they weren't necessarily filled with soil down to the far bottom. That doesn't take away from the fact that, in fact, your plants will do better if it's a pretty deep pot for most of these natives. But yeah, they weren't always all the way down to the bottom.
So was it peanuts in the bottom?
I don't even know what they had in the bottom. Oftentimes they had like a pot inside a pot. They were double potted, and you couldn't see that. But yeah,
Look good.
they did look. Oh yeah.
Can
I add a quickie, Cliff,
this
before
has
you
been
cut us off?
fascinating, and I would could listen to this all night, but it's 9 o'clock, and we're starting to lose some participants.
Okay.
So I think we should cut it off pretty soon. But if you have some things you want to address fairly quickly at the end here, I think that would be great.
I just wanted to quickly, because I'm sure Orchid's got a lot of feedback on this because she's gardened with a lot of deer. But Descanso Gardens, which has an 18-acre native plant garden that was started by Theodore Payne, they have a deer problem like you would, to end all deer problems. And Layla Valenzuela, who is the native plant gardener there, the horticulturist, she has been working on this for 6 or 7 years. And she has refined it there, of which they love Ceanothus except for this one and this one. I mean, she's like isolated 2. But if you go up into that garden, you'll see what she has, what's left. And if you can talk to Layla and talk about her experiences, they are so connected to the wild areas, and they have incredible damage all through Descanso. But she's really refined it down to a lovely plant palette up there.
Okay. I'm good. I don't have anything else to add.
I'm gonna add that in dry winters, I was trying to type this, but I hit the answer live. In dry winters, I do not stop watering because that's a time when you can actually get extra water to the plants. And I'll try and fill up the soil reservoir by watering regularly as long as it stays cool from all winter long. I mean, not on the rainy days, obviously, but we have a dry winter. I'll try and give the amount of water that we would have gotten had we had a rainy winter until it starts to get warm, and then I stop.
Yeah. I always tell people if we don't get a good soak every couple of weeks, make like the rain. And a lot of our rainstorms, quote unquote, here are 1/10 of an inch, and that doesn't do anything to really get your plants wet. So make sure they get a good soak every few weeks.
Okay.
And then Drew is cracking me up. He says, Matilda Poppy, also a good one for the neighbor's yard. You'll still get it in your yard if you plant it at your neighbor's.
That, yeah, Barbara's going to do that one across the street also.
We're all laughing for those who don't know, because the roots is, if a Matilda Poppy is happy, its roots, it's just, it'll cross a sidewalk.
It'll come up
It
in the
just-
next zip code.
Yeah, it will. And it's hard to control at that point. So, okay. I know that we didn't get to everybody's question, and we're sorry about that. You know, you can always ask questions via the CNPS San Gabriel Mountains chapter website, or on, you can comment to me on Weeding
me.
Wild Suburbia, or Lily. How do they reach you, Lily?
I can put my email in the chat. Would that be the place, or how should we, or through Orchid?
Or me, you know, if you
Or through
comment to
Barbara.
me, I'll get it to Lily.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you could send it to Barbara. I have a contact me on nativesanctuary.wordpress.com. If you send stuff to the chapter, although the volunteer people who want to volunteer should send things to the chapter, we don't answer those kind of questions very quickly, if at all. So Barbara is probably your best bet on Weeding Wild Suburbia, and my website. If you just Google orchid and native plants, you can find it.
And we can put my email into, as well as the chat. Is that where it should go, or into the Q&A?
I think you should just comment on Barbara's website.
Oh, okay.
yeah, then in case there's some
Barbara can
wacko
say,
out
I don't
there.
know this one. I'm going to give it to Lily.
That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. Well, thank you all for great
Yes, thank
questions,
you.
and your thank yous as well.
Yes,
That's great.
absolutely. This has been terrific. And by the way, if you want to leave something for the chapter, then you can do it by just sending an email to cnps@cnps-sgm.org. SGM is for San Gabriel Mountains chapter, or go to our website, which is cnps-sgm.org, and go to the Contact Us page. We do try to answer all those things, but as pointed out, it may not be immediate.
We try.
Well, this has been fantastic. I'm amazed at the depth of experience that all three have demonstrated here tonight, and even more amazed at how well they work together. Isn't that
Yeah,
amazing?
it was really fun.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, it is.
So save
think-
up your questions, because we probably will do this again before
exactly.
we can't.
Yeah, that's a good
Sounds
idea.
Sounds good. Okay, good night, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care and have great
Thank
gardening.
you.
Okay, Lily, since you are
Yeah.
now as the host, I think you need to be the one that shuts it down.
Okay, because I just assign and leave. I don't want to do that. Assign
Oh.
a new host. I'm turning it over to you, buddy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Great. Good night, everybody.
Night, Cliff.
Oh, by the way, Rebecca, I think I managed to record this on my drive instead of in the Zoom cloud. So I might have to send you a big file.
Yeah, we can talk about the best way to do that. I'll
Right.
shoot you a message.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.